Just moments ago, a live broadcast gripped the United Kingdom, shaking its very foundation. Prince William, typically a pillar of grace and composure, stood before the cameras in a deeply personal and emotional moment that no one had anticipated. His voice, usually steady and confident, trembled as he spoke, causing ripples of shock to echo through the royal family and across the nation. What was supposed to be a formal address to discuss a youth project, an initiative tied to the monarchy's future leadership, spiraled into something far more profound and emotionally charged. It was an unexpected revelation that would leave the world reeling. William, ever the royal figurehead, began his speech with his usual calm and regal demeanor. His words were poised, delivered with the confidence that had come with a lifetime of preparation. He stood before a room full of eager young faces, each one looking up to him with hope and admiration. His words spoke of responsibility, of the future of the monarchy, of how important it was for the royal family to remain an anchor of stability for the nation. This was all routine, the kind of speech William had given many times before, the kind of speech that was meant to reinforce his place as a future king. But then something extraordinary happened. As William spoke of the monarchy's future, and specifically his son Prince Louis's place in that future, the composure he had worked so hard to maintain started to crumble. The weight of the monarchy's demands, the burden of the crown, seemed to crush him in real time. His voice wavered, and for the briefest moment, his words faltered. And then came the admission that would forever change the course of royal history. "I can't lie any more about what's coming," William said, his voice breaking, his throat tight with emotion. His words hung heavy in the air, each syllable more than just an admission. They were the opening of a door that had long been kept shut. For the first time in public, the world saw a prince, a father who was utterly overwhelmed by the weight of the world. The burden he had carried for so long, unspoken, unshed, had finally broken free. A stunned silence enveloped the room. The young faces, eager and expectant moments ago, were now filled with confusion and concern. Princess Anne, seated in the front row, could not hide her furrowed brow, her concern growing as she watched her brother unravel. Queen Camilla, seated beside her, exchanged a look with Anne, one that was equal parts understanding and unease. It was as if they both knew the enormity of what was unfolding, a truth they had all carefully kept from the world now spilling out in front of millions. William, the future King of England, was no longer simply the face of the monarchy. He was a father, devastated by the very institution that had defined his life. To the public, this was nothing short of a shock. The prince, the future king, once the epitome of royal poise, was now exposed as vulnerable, as human. Speculation spread like wildfire. Was this just stress from the pressure of royal life? Or was it something far more personal, perhaps a deep-seated conflict involving his young son, Prince Louis? The world wanted answers, but the royal family had spent years hiding the truth, keeping their most painful secrets buried in the deepest corners of the palace. But those within the royal circle knew that William's breakdown was far from an accident. It wasn't just emotional. It was a calculated release of something that had been kept hidden for far too long, a secret that was no longer sustainable. The truth William had been carrying was now in the open. It could no longer be concealed. For years, the whispers had been growing louder inside the royal family's walls. A secret dossier, a file so carefully protected that it had never been meant for the public, had been hidden away, locked behind layers of royal secrecy. But in that one moment, as William's voice cracked, the door to that file opened, and its contents were exposed to the world. The truth within the dossier was nothing short of explosive, so much so that it threatened to unravel the very fabric of the royal family's carefully constructed image. The dossier didn't just contain medical evaluations or psychological assessments. It held something far more damning, a roadmap to a future that no child should ever be forced to face. The contents of the file revealed that Prince Louis, the youngest heir to the throne, might never be able to bear the weight of the crown, not because he lacked the intelligence or the strength, but because the emotional and psychological toll of royal duty could break him before he even had the chance to grow into it. The very thing that had once been a symbol of power, the monarchy, had now become a potential burden that could destroy the very children it sought to protect. For Catherine and William, this revelation was nothing short of a nightmare come to life. They had spent years trying to protect their children, particularly Louis, from the suffocating weight of the monarchy. They had tried to give him a normal childhood, shielded from the prying eyes of the public, away from the expectations of duty that had defined their own lives. They had done everything they could to protect him from the relentless demands of a crown he had never asked for. But now, with the truth spilling into the open, their fight to protect him seemed lost. William, unable to carry the burden of this secret any longer, had finally cracked. What was once a prince's duty to the crown had transformed into a father's plea for his child's safety. The words he had spoken were no longer just a reflection of royal duty. They were the raw, unfiltered cry of a father who could no longer shield his son from the truth. Inside the royal family's halls, the whispers about Louis's future had become impossible to ignore. For years, they had tried to bury the contents of the dossier, to keep the truth hidden behind a veil of secrecy. But now, with William's emotional confession, the truth had been exposed, and it was clear that the royal family could no longer pretend that everything was fine. The truth was out. Princess Anne, who had long been an advocate for truth and transparency, knew that the monarchy could no longer hide behind tradition. She had seen enough of the palace's secrets, enough of the pain that royal children were forced to endure in silence. For Anne, the time had come to confront the truth, and she would not allow the monarchy to continue down a path of denial. Balmoral became the setting for a dramatic confrontation within the royal family. Anne, never one to shy away from difficult conversations, called for a private meeting with Charles, Camilla, and William. It was no longer about royal protocol or the smooth functioning of the family's public image. It was about saving their family from the very institution that had bound them to a future they did not want. It was a reckoning. Anne placed a sealed envelope in front of them, heavy with the weight of its contents. The royal crest was still visible on the envelope, an emblem of power, but also a symbol of the monarchy's struggles. Inside the envelope were the psychological evaluations, the medical reports, and the secret assessments of Prince Louis, documents that had been locked away for years. Anne didn't hesitate. She looked each of them in the eye and spoke plainly. "The press will either lead with truth or we will." The words were clear, direct, and carried the weight of a woman who had seen enough. The royal family could no longer pretend that everything was fine. The time had come to face the truth, no matter the consequences. Camilla, ever the strategist, resisted. She questioned Anne's timing, the risks involved, and the potential consequences of such a public confrontation. But Anne remained unmoved. She saw the cover-up for what it was, cowardice in the face of truth. The royal family could no longer shield themselves behind tradition. They had to choose tradition or truth. William, still reeling from his emotional breakdown, watched quietly. He knew Anne was right. This wasn't about protecting the family's image. It was about protecting Louis, about ensuring his safety and well-being. The royal family's image could no longer take precedence over their children's futures. Anne's ultimatum had been made clear, and for the first time the monarchy was forced to confront its own failings. There was no going back. The truth about Louis had to come to light, no matter the cost. The walls that had long separated the royal family from the public were beginning to crumble. Anne, ever the one to speak her mind and challenge the status quo, placed the sealed envelope on the polished table in front of her family. The royal crest, embossed in gold, glinted under the soft lights of the room, an emblem not only of power but also of centuries of tradition and secrecy. The crest had long been a symbol of authority, and yet in that moment it felt heavy with the burden of hidden truths. Inside the envelope lay the medical and psychological evaluations of Prince Louis, documents that had been carefully concealed from the world for years. These were no ordinary reports. They held the weight of a child's future, a future that had been molded by forces beyond his control. Anne's actions spoke louder than any words could. As she slid the envelope across the table, there was a palpable shift in the air. The royal family had been carefully guarding their public image for generations, but Anne had had enough. Her gaze remained steady, unflinching as she addressed the room, the weight of her words sinking into every corner of the space. "The press will either lead with truth or we will," she said, each syllable sharp and unwavering. The room, filled with people who had lived their lives in the shadow of royal decorum, was now faced with an impossible choice. For too long they had hidden behind tradition, behind polished speeches and calculated images. But in that moment, Anne knew the truth could no longer be ignored. The world, with its insatiable thirst for answers, would no longer allow them to hide. Her words reverberated through the room, cutting through the tension like a blade. The royal family had always prided themselves on control, on being above reproach, above public scrutiny. But that control, carefully maintained for generations, was slipping away. The public was no longer content with the polished facade. They were demanding to know what lay beneath it. and Anne had just ripped that facade wide open. Camilla, ever the tactician, felt the shift. She hesitated, her mind racing through the consequences of Anne's declaration. She was always calculating, always playing a careful game of royal diplomacy. But Anne's challenge struck her to the core. The press will lead with truth, or we will. The very words Anne had uttered hung in the air, heavy with the weight of inevitability. Camilla's instincts told her to push back, to question Anne's timing, to consider the risks. What would this mean for the monarchy? For their family? For the carefully constructed image they had worked so hard to protect? Could the royal family afford to be so vulnerable, so raw before the public? She turned to Anne, her voice steady but laced with concern. "Anne, you cannot be serious. This is too risky. The monarchy has been built on centuries of tradition, and we cannot just throw it all away. There are consequences we can't even imagine." But Anne's gaze never wavered. She had been in the palace long enough to understand the weight of protocol, the weight of power, and the price of silence. She was no stranger to the politics that ran through the veins of the royal family, but this was something different. This was about family. This was about their children, their future. Anne knew that if they didn't confront the truth now, the consequences would be far greater than any royal scandal could ever be. She had seen too much of the palace's inner workings, the cover-ups, the secrets, the lies. She was done with it. "This isn't about tradition, Camilla," she said, her voice unwavering. "It's about survival. Not just the survival of the monarchy, but the survival of our children, and that for once is more important than tradition." William, still grappling with the weight of his emotional breakdown, sat silently, his face pale, his eyes distant. He had already broken down in front of the world, an event that had left him vulnerable, exposed. And now, as he sat in that room, he understood what was at stake. The royal family, once so proud of its control, was crumbling before his eyes. It wasn't just the monarchy that was in jeopardy, it was the future of his children. And in that moment, he realized that Anne was right. This wasn't about saving face or preserving royal tradition. It was about protecting Louis, about ensuring that he wasn't swallowed up by the expectations of a life he had never chosen. It was about giving him a chance at a future outside of the suffocating demands of the crown. William glanced at Anne, silently supporting her. He didn't need to speak. His agreement was clear in the way he sat there, nodding slowly, his face filled with a quiet determination. He had been holding this secret for too long. The weight of it had broken him, and now the truth had to come out. The room, once filled with royal composure and calculated moves, was now thick with tension. The family was at a crossroads, and there was no going back. The question that lingered in the air was simple, but its implications were vast. Would they continue to cling to the traditions that had defined them for centuries, or would they face the truth about their children, their family, and their future? The walls of secrecy had been built brick by brick, each layer adding to the weight of the monarchy. But now Anne had torn those walls down, and the royal family had no choice but to face what lay behind them. In the days that followed, the world began to piece together the truth. And then, as if by fate, Meghan Markle made a statement during a podcast interview that seemed eerily prophetic. "No child should bear a crown heavier than their soul," she said, her words soft but filled with undeniable weight. At first, her comment seemed like a simple reflection on the pressures of being in the public eye, of carrying the burden of expectation. But as the days passed, the timing of her words seemed too perfect to ignore. Only days before William's breakdown, Meghan had spoken out about the very same struggles that had been tearing apart the royal family from the inside. Was her statement a veiled reference to Prince Louis? Was it an indirect acknowledgement of the crushing weight of royal duty that Louis had been forced to bear? Or was it a broader reflection on the burdens that had been placed on so many royal children over the years, children who were expected to live up to a legacy they had never asked for? The world began to take notice. Meghan's words, though subtle, began to resonate deeply with the public. Was she speaking out in defense of Louis, signaling that she knew more about the palace's inner workings than anyone had realized? Or was it simply a coincidence, an offhand comment in a world full of noise? The press, always quick to pounce on anything related to the royal family, immediately began to draw connections. Was Meghan, once on the inside of the royal family, now on the outside, speaking from a place of knowledge? Had she, along with Harry, been aware of Louis's struggles for longer than the public had known? Were they preparing to speak out, to bring the royal family's darkest secrets to light? The timing was too perfect. The world, already reeling from William's emotional breakdown, now found itself on the precipice of something much larger. The royal family, for the first time in history, was being forced to confront its own demons. The public, once enamored with the grandeur of the monarchy, now saw it for what it truly was, an institution built on tradition, but also on pain, secrecy, and immense pressure. Meghan's statement, combined with William's raw confession and Anne's ultimatum, made it clear. The royal family could no longer hide from the truth. The walls that had kept them safe from public scrutiny for so long were crumbling. The monarchy, as the world had known it, was changing. And as the royal family faced this monumental shift, one question remained. Would they adapt to a changing world, or would they continue to cling to the past? The truth was out, and the royal family had no choice but to confront it. The world was watching, and the future of the monarchy hung in the balance. Anne, never one to shy away from speaking her mind, felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She wasn't just a royal. She was a sister, a protector, and a fierce advocate for the truth. Without hesitation, she placed the sealed envelope in front of her family, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment before speaking. The royal crest, embossed in gold, caught the light, its brilliance a stark contrast to the heavy truth it now symbolized. The crest was not only a symbol of power and tradition, but also of the monarchy's tightly held secrets, its silences, and its unspoken rules. Inside that envelope lay a devastating reality: medical and psychological evaluations of Prince Louis. Documents that had been carefully hidden away, locked in the deepest recesses of the palace, guarded like state secrets. But Anne knew the time had come to bring it all into the open. She couldn't allow her family to continue living in the shadow of an institution that demanded too much from its youngest members, not when it came at the cost of their well-being. Anne's voice broke the stillness, sharp and unwavering, as she made her declaration. "The press will either lead with truth or we will." These words were no mere challenge, they were an ultimatum. The tension in the room was palpable, thick with the weight of centuries of royal tradition and secrecy. The royal family had long been the guardians of public perception, and they had built an empire on keeping the truth hidden behind a veil of decorum and control. But Anne had had enough. She had seen the costs of silence, the toll that the monarchy's demands had taken on her family, and she knew that it was time for the truth to come out. The world would no longer be kept in the dark. Her words cut through the air like a blade, and the ripple effect was immediate. The room seemed to hold its breath, every member of the royal family processing the gravity of what Anne had just laid before them. Camilla, always the consummate strategist, immediately hesitated. She had spent decades navigating the complex and often treacherous waters of royal protocol, always thinking several steps ahead. But in this moment, Anne's challenge threatened to upend everything Camilla had worked to preserve. "The press will lead with truth, or we will." Camilla felt the weight of those words pressing down on her. Was this truly the right moment to expose the family's deepest secrets? Could they afford to risk everything, tradition, legacy, the carefully cultivated image of the monarchy, for the sake of one child's future? Camilla's mind raced as she questioned Anne's timing, her motivations, and the risks involved in such a public revelation. The monarchy had been built on centuries of tradition and stability, but in that instant, it was clear that Anne was prepared to burn it all down if necessary. Anne's eyes locked onto Camilla's, unflinching. She wasn't seeking approval, she had made up her mind. "This isn't about tradition, Camilla. It's about truth. It's about family, and it's about protecting our children from the very institution that is meant to support them. No more secrets." In that moment, the stakes were higher than they had ever been. The royal family was no longer just an institution. It was a family in crisis, a family forced to confront the dark realities of what their legacy had become. For the first time in their lives, they were standing at a crossroads with no clear path forward. Would they continue to cling to their rigid traditions, or would they break free from the chains of the past to protect their own? William, who had been sitting in silence, his mind reeling from the emotional breakdown he had just experienced in front of the world, looked up. His face was pale, drained of color. The weight of everything that had transpired, the breakdown, the secrets, the overwhelming pressure, was too much for him to bear. He felt like a man caught in a storm, unable to find solid ground. But in that moment, as Anne's words filled the room, he knew she was right. The family could no longer continue hiding behind the walls of tradition and silence. They had to choose: the future of their children or the preservation of an outdated legacy. William nodded, his silence speaking volumes. He didn't need to say anything. His support for Anne's decision was evident. This wasn't just about his family's image anymore. This was about protecting Louis, about ensuring he didn't suffer the same fate that had befallen so many royal children before him. The room was thick with tension as Anne's ultimatum sank in. The monarchy was at a precipice, and the royal family had no choice but to leap. They had been living in the shadow of an institution that demanded too much of them for too long. The question now was whether they would continue to follow an old, broken path or embrace the truth that was staring them in the face. As the days passed, the world watched closely, eager for any sign of what the royal family would do next. And then, as if the universe itself had aligned, Meghan Markle made a statement in a podcast interview that seemed to echo the very struggles the family had been hiding for so long. "No child should bear a crown heavier than their soul," she said, her words simple but profound, and they resonated with millions of listeners around the globe. At first, her comments seemed like just another offhand reflection on the weight of public life, the burdens that came with being in the spotlight. But as the world absorbed the news of William's breakdown and Anne's challenge to the family's secrets, Meghan's statement began to take on new meaning. The timing was too perfect. It wasn't just a passing remark. It felt deliberate, as though Meghan, too, understood the cost of royal duty, the very same duty that had been imposed on Louis from the moment he was born. The connection between Meghan's words and the royal family's crisis was immediate and undeniable. Was Meghan, from her position outside the monarchy, now speaking out about Louis's future? Had she been aware of the pressure that had been mounting behind closed doors? Was this her way of joining the conversation, subtly supporting Anne's call for transparency, and signaling that the royal family's hidden truths were no longer safe? The press, always hungry for a scandal, latched onto Meghan's words, drawing immediate comparisons between her statement and the royal family's turmoil. Was this a coordinated effort? Had there been a leak from within the palace? The speculation grew rampant as the media, along with the public, tried to piece together the puzzle. The royal family, once seen as invincible, was now the subject of a global conversation about transparency, mental health, and the future of the monarchy. But even as the media frenzy reached its peak, Catherine had already made her decision. The letter she had written, now released to the public, became the turning point in this saga. The Windsor Vow, as it would be called, was more than just a letter. It was a mother's declaration of defiance against the monarchy itself. In it, Catherine demanded that Louis be allowed to live a life free from the pressures of the crown. She spoke of the unbearable weight of royal duty, the emotional toll it took on her son, and the crushing expectations that had been placed on him since birth. The reaction to the letter was swift and powerful. Catherine, once seen as the epitome of royal composure, had now become the fiercest advocate for her family. She had broken free from the chains of royal tradition, and in doing so, she had set the stage for a new era. The royal family was no longer simply an institution of power. It was a family in crisis, a family struggling to protect their own. Charles, in an unexpected move, made a bold decision. In a televised speech, he announced that the monarchy would no longer impose its duties on its youngest heirs. Prince Louis, he declared, would be allowed to step away from his royal responsibilities and live his life on his own terms. The monarchy, it seemed, was ready to change. The shockwave from this decision reverberated throughout the Commonwealth and beyond. The royal family had long been seen as a symbol of unwavering strength, of tradition and stability. But now, they were facing a fundamental question. Could they survive the pressure of modern times? Could they evolve without losing their essence? Could they adapt to the changing world, or would they hold on to their traditions at the cost of their family's happiness? The royal family, once the embodiment of unyielding strength and authority, was now grappling with its own internal struggles. The question that remained was not just about the future of Prince Louis, but the future of the monarchy itself. Could it endure the pressure of modern expectations, or would it crumble under the weight of its own legacy?